join, but might as well kind of get started here. So first of all, I mean, thank you guys for having me. I love any of these types of initiatives. When you see these things going on in Solana, I've always been a big proponent of getting people together for a good reason and pushing developers in whatever way, you know, like if you're interested in doing something, but then having a huge collective all jumping on at the same time trying to build because there's, you know, game jam, there's some prizes, there's all kinds of stuff like that, but just getting everybody together is always a great way of wayfinding. And I think one of the most underrated things is social accountability. Having a bunch of people all, you know, building their respective products at the same time definitely fuels that fire. So I love this type of stuff. So I'm really glad that I got to be part of this. Kind of talk to y'all today. So yeah, without further ado, my name's Aiden, co-founder of Ladder Labs. We're a Canadian company, and we built Buddy Link, and then prior to that, we actually built the first fully on-chain game on Solana. It's called Laddercaster. So right now, we have some few things to deliver back to that community, but we basically had this idea. The whole inception of it was back in 2021. We were, you know, actually 2020. We were talking to the co-founders of Solana, Raj and Anatoly, and we were like, okay, we got to figure out what we want to build on this chain because they were, you know, trying to get us to come build some stuff. And then eventually we were just like, you know, screw it. We actually just gotta build something ourselves. And we always had this idea for Buddy Link, which is imagine if you had one link to refer people to everything in crypto. But then we were like, okay, that would be an amazing thing. And we think Solana has the tech stack to support it. We bought the domain back in 2019. So we've had this idea for a long time. And we tried a bunch of different chains. Nothing really supported what we wanted to do from an infrastructure perspective. It's just like nothing, the technology wasn't there. It didn't make much sense. And so we realized we had to, once we found Solana, we were like, okay, wait a second. This could probably support Buddy Link, this infrastructure, but we need something direct to consumer first. We need to be able to see if we can build a full stack for an application and get real-time feedback from users. And so that's when we decided to build a game. So we built Laddercaster 100% on chain. There's zero backend. Everything was 100% on the blockchain. And in our first month of launch was April 2022. We did 4 million transactions, which is actually a quarter of all of the on-chain transactions that month because Solana was struggling pretty hard. They were doing 8 TPS. And so Laddercaster ended up just like ripping and doing a whole bunch of transactions on chain, which again, there was a lot of optimizations to make and all that sort of thing, but it was still very impressive that we had so many economic transactions, right, happening. And these are users paying for their transactions to go through, which was phenomenal. One of the interesting things was we didn't have really any monetization in that game from the start. We actually started with a token. We wanted to do a fair launch token, and you needed to use the token to purchase your characters in the game. So that was the only monetization that existed. But even then, it wasn't fully baked, and the whole reason was we just wanted it to be enough barrier to entry that it's not like open to everybody. But additionally, because we wanted it to be like, you know, hey, this is an MVP that we were getting out as a first fully on-chain game. We didn't know what was going to break. We were like, we need people who are willing to chew glass with us through this process and understand that this is a big experiment too. And additionally, we also weren't 100% sure what we were allowed to monetize as a game that was actually based in Canada from a regulation perspective. My team's background, my co-founder Calvin and the rest of our team who had built out the game, actually, they built the largest crypto exchange in Canada. And while they were doing that, I actually was in the government of Canada and I was doing regulation and all kinds of stuff. So we saw end-to-end crypto. And that was one of the biggest impediments to trying to figure out monetization strategies in the game, was figuring out what are we legally allowed to do. So I think that's, if I'm going to start off with anything, it's this. It's whenever you're thinking about any type of monetization, there's kind of three major buckets that I want to discuss today. Actually, I think that'll probably help set this up a little bit better. But knowing this background, the first is what exactly is the product? Can you hear clearly? Can you guys hear me? Am I good? Or is this, can you get some thumbs up in the chat if it's all good? Okay, good. Yeah, so basically, the three things that I really wanted to kind of cover today were, one is, what exactly is the product you're trying to build? That's the first thing. You have to really determine what kind of product, and we'll go through what that looks like and sort of the different various components to that. What type of product do you want to build? Then the second piece is, what are your constraints in terms of what, that could be where you're located. Is there any constraints by building? Let's say you're based in Vietnam. Is there any regulatory constraints? Is there any opportunity constraints? Is there anything like that? And then third is, what kind of, now that you have that, you've designed your application, your product, you've understood all of the constraints. The final piece is, what kind of economic loops make the most sense, right? And there's, that breaks down into three pieces, which I'll get into and I'll spend the most time on because that's the most important thing. And then after that, we'll talk about fundraising and how to position things. So first and foremost is, what is the design of the product that you're trying to build? Like, very simply put, if you're trying to build a game that is a AAA game, let's say a AAA massive, Unreal Engine, super crazy graphics, all of this sort of thing, you're appealing to a specific demographic and a specific audience. And if you're trying to build in that way and you're building on chain, you have to think a lot of trade-offs. Like, there's immense number of trade-offs. Are you putting any of the logic of the game on chain? Right. I know Honeycomb Protocol is a great example of a resource that allows you to put more and more stuff on chain. Sonic, obviously abstracting a lot away and allowing you to use, faster throughput to be able to put more and more logic on chain as well. But again, it comes down to, what is the design of the game? Is this a casual mobile first tapper game? Is this a real-time strategy? Is it like, what is the exact product that you're trying to design? And it's really crucial, in my opinion, from all of the experience that I've had in the gaming industry, has been to really frame this not so much as what kind of game are you building, but what kind of product are you building? Because games are effectively just the most difficult products to design. That's the truth. There's everything from, you have direct to consumer, right? So you have to figure out your audiences. You have to figure out the loops that are going to be good, that are going to stick with your audiences. They are the highest churn products that exist. Statistically, you can look it up, and churn being, users come in, users end up rolling out of your application, all those sorts of things. And also, it's really difficult to acquire users into a game if there's any amount of friction, if you're building it as, any components of Web3 that are in there. So thinking about the design of that game and how you're actually trying to implement this thing, how much business logic is going to be on chain, and how difficult and high friction, high barrier to entry it is for a user to start playing your game. That's the first thing you need to start with. And you need to really think about that critically in order to really understand what kind of constraints you're going to be operating under, because that impacts all of the other things that we're going to talk about. That it impacts what kind of users you can target. It impacts the acquisition cost of those users, right? It impacts the retention of those users. If they're not crypto native and somehow they do get through and they start playing your game, like as in they've never used crypto before, but you've made it simple enough for them to sign up. All of a sudden they start playing the game, and all of a sudden, 30 seconds into their journey, they're hit with this wall of like, oh, you need to create a wallet and then this and that and whatever. Let's say you pushed it down the pipeline for that user, which is already a good step, but they hit that pipeline, they hit that part in the process, and they freak out, right? They're like, I don't know what to do here. They don't have any friends in this. They weren't referred to it. They just found it. There's no way that you're getting that user to stay long term. They're churning out immediately. So those are things that you really need to think about before you even think about monetization. You need to think about, what is the actual onboarding experience of these users? How are they coming into my game? And what kind of game am I really building? Because that'll also all determine what kind of users you can target. Now, I think the main thing to think about when it comes to actually implementing different monetization strategies, it comes down to what type of game and what type of user is playing your game. So there's three main things that people pay for. It's vanity, there's time, and there's convenience. And we've seen that across every industry, every gaming industry. We're talking every vertical of gaming. So we'll start with vanity. So again, back to, what kind of product are you building? What kind of product are you designing? And is it on chain? Is it off chain? We're going to take two examples. We're going to go with, one is a Web2 game, entirely off chain, right? Like 90% of everything is off chain, but because we're doing crypto stuff, we're going to say that there's NFTs involved, right? So the NFTs are on chain. And then we're going to go with the completely other side of the spectrum. We're going to say the whole thing is on chain, everything, every aspect. There's a token involved, there's NFTs, there's everything. When you're thinking about it, we're going to go with vanity. Let's say there's characters, or there's you have wallpapers in your app. You have anything that can show that you are elite, right? And you have shareable stuff. In terms of game design, you want to have a bunch of users sharing your content. You want to have UGC, user generated content. That's where you push vanity like crazy, and you try to get users to spend on vanity purchases. So that's skins for their characters. That's again, like wallpapers, backgrounds. Simplest form of this is like chessboards. You want to have multiple different chessboards available, multiple different visuals that you can put up. And I want to be able to share. It has to have a share button every time I win or every time I get something cool. It's like, hey, go share this to Twitter or share this to Telegram. And obviously building in incentive mechanisms for your users to want to go and share that stuff. That's where users are going to see, oh, I want my board or my character or my whatever it is that I'm sharing. I want them to see that I'm elite. I want them to see that I'm the best, and they're going to pay for, a gold skin, an ultra rare, or whatever it is, in order for them to look the best when they go and share that content. That's how you monetize through vanity. On the convenience and on the time side, those are two different things, but they're closely related, but they're specifically different. Convenience is something people will pay for every single time, and it's mainly the big spenders that will pay for convenience. So you have this really interesting funnel in gaming, where your top 5% spenders usually spend 90% of all of your revenue. That's where all of your revenue comes from. That's why getting really, really good advertising firms and things like that in the traditional gaming, working with publishers and things like that, they're attracting those big users. And the reason you want to think about it in that way is because how do you design these convenience features where they will be like catch-up mechanics, where it's kind of like pay to win, but how do you balance that out with making the game fun enough and still like equal enough so that your base users will still have a lot of fun, and that they won't feel that, oh, somebody can just come in here, spend $100 and then just jump all the way over the leaderboard on me. So that's specific in the game design for monetization. Is, let's say I'm paying to skip the queue on something or whatever. That is a fantastic mechanic, but you need to be able to make sure that that doesn't make everybody else feel like that they're just their time is wasted playing this game. So you're usually going to have your baseline spenders, and this is now I'm going into the crypto specific stuff for this. The entire crypto industry is like, especially for products, is a bit flipped. You have to think of baseline users as extractive users. Most of the users that you're getting that are low customer acquisition costs, we're talking like, airdrop farmers, we're talking emerging market demographics and things like that. If you're targeting those users and you're trying to onboard those users, those are not typically your spenders. Those are people who are going to come in and they're going to boost your baseline stats, and they're going to be evangelized supporters who will give you lots of feedback. They're going to be in the Discord every day. They're the ones who are going to be playing the game a whole bunch, but they're not going to be spending anything really. But your customer acquisition cost is going to be really low. So you're getting what you're paying for, right, to acquire those users. They're going to come in, they're going to play a lot, but they're not going to spend. But having that base layer of a bunch of users playing your game and getting all of those metrics down, that is what's going to be attractive for when you then go and target your higher spending users. Now, targeting users and targeting acquisition in Web3 is really difficult. That's why we built BuddyLink. BuddyLink is supposed to be an acquisition engine and all this sort of thing. I'm not here to plug that, but it is a really big problem. Like, I'm saying this because I know inherently how difficult it is to target and acquire those big spending users, right? Or any users in general in this Web3 process. But when you're going to acquire them, if you have that baseline of users already playing your game, it makes it way more attractive for those big spenders, because they FOMO, right? That fear of missing out for a big spender is one of the biggest driving forces for them to come in and spend on saving time and on convenience features. That's what they'll do every time. And that's what they'll mainly spend on. Once they start jumping the leaderboard and they get, close to the top 80%, let's say a really hardcore player can really be at the top of the leaderboard without spending any money. Well, that's fantastic. The whale, or the really big spender, needs to be able to come in and jump up the leaderboard up to like the 80th percentile. You really want them to be able to do that so that they feel that they're competing, but that the average user doesn't feel like they just got paid to win and somebody's just coming in. Like Diablo Inferno is a perfect example, the mobile Diablo game. That shit was so pay to win, it was insane. They made billions of dollars. This is like really insane profit generating engine, but like everybody knew it was just pay to win. And the biggest spenders were Chinese and Koreans, and they came in and they just spent a whole bunch of money to jump over the leaderboards. And that was a really interesting rollout scheme because Diablo does so well in North America and Europe, but Diablo Inferno actually ended up targeting Southeast Asia and Asia overall as a rollout. So it had like, I think it was like 60% dominance on Asia side playing Diablo, which was like a first ever Diablo game that dominated in Asia. So just all things to consider when you're thinking about what types of channels you want to monetize. One thing that's really interesting about being on chain, you have all of these really interesting economic levers you can pull with compressed NFTs that really cost you nothing. You have obviously tokens that you can put into your game. This comes back to the regulatory question, though. You have to really make sure that you're in an environment like your company or you as a person are in a place where you can use tokens in order to fuel your game. But all of that comes down to, once again, back to the beginning, what kind of product are you building and what are the economics of that thing? If the token is just slapped on top of an experience and it's not critical to the game or crucial to the game, a regulator is going to immediately jump down your throat and be like, this is not okay. It won't be right away, but if anybody wants to make an example of that, they will definitely point to that token and say, hey, like you got to write a reasonable defense to this token. Why does this exist? What is it for? Other than for you to make money. And if the answer is not good enough, it's not sufficient, you're going to be tied up in a lot of trouble. So the whole point that I'm trying to make on the token side is make sure that is actually essential to the design of the product if you're going to put a token in. But the token, that being said, is one of the most amazing fundraising tools and best ways of you retaining full control of your product, right? Once you get that token out, that's what's called non-dilutive capital, right? You're selling something to an audience, or your audience, maybe if you're not selling it, your audience is willingly purchasing this token that actually gives you revenue in order to then continue fueling the product design of the game. And that's really, really important. And you see it all the time in crypto. But the structures of the companies that are doing this stuff, often they have offshore companies, they have multiple different entities in order to put protections in place to make sure that they, as people, as founders, are protected. So those are things I just really want to bring up to make sure everybody's aware, because man, monetization through tokens and tokenization, fantastic. But the regulatory environment is always something to consider. I come from the most ridiculous one, which is Canada. Canada flip-flops all the time, and it makes it really difficult to navigate anything. So I'm hyper aware of it. And we launched our game token onshore in Canada and everything as a fair launch token above board and whatever. And it was still one of the most stressful experiences of my life, because I was like, at any point, if the regulator decides to come back and try and push and make us an example, it's going to be a really annoying nightmare. Not just because I think we would win no matter what. We have we're super, super solid in all of our designs, but it's more that we would then be spending in legal fees. It would take me away from building the game. It would take us away from, the journey. And that's the part that you really want to avoid. So when it comes to those monetization channels, if it's on-chain stuff, just make sure that you are really focusing on the right channels to monetize. I can see the Canadian pain. Yeah, it's a very annoying environment. This said, final wrap up on the monetization stuff before I talk about the fundraising here is, whatever your game design is, it could be anything, again, from a tapper game, super hyper casual mobile game, to an RTS or a MMORPG, AAA shooter game. We'll just go that full spectrum. It really doesn't matter what it is. Monetization using Web3 tooling, we're talking like NFTs, tokens, etc., is a great way to increase your bottom lines. That's the truth. You can use all of these NFTs and things like that. You can throw royalties on them, so you have secondary fees that you're generating as well. But all of it has to still come down to, you need to build with the intention that these things are actually helpful or make sense within your product design. You really just can't throw a token on top of an existing product and hope that it works. It has to be intentional, and it has to actually improve the user's experience. Same thing with skins and all the stuff. Skins and whatever, that's vanity. And if you know that you're going down the vanity route, you go ahead, but make sure that your game loop is so sticky. Make sure that those users, when they land, they want to upgrade their stuff just visually, right? If it's not pay to win at all and you're not doing convenience or time features, then just triple down on having a really good asset pipeline to get that vanity stuff going. And I guess that actually does bring up another point that I forgot to mention is double down on your strengths. If you are, if you have access to a studio or you are yourself a really good designer and you can do this stuff really quickly, then try and actually create something around, an asset pipeline. If you can really pump out assets really quickly for, character designs or items or anything like that, double down on that. If you have really deep game background design experience, then double down on that, right? Like whatever it is, try and double down on the strengths to make it easier for you to monetize down that one funnel. If you have a particular design of a product in mind, a game in mind, and you have to go down that route and you've never kind of done that before, no problem. Just really think about it. You might need to push off monetization further down the pipeline if you don't immediately know, if it's not immediately evident for you in what exactly you're going to monetize. Um, all of that being said, you really need to think about that monetization irrespective of how it's going to come through the pipeline. Because now, when it comes to, I'm going to talk about fundraising, it is really important that you, like somebody who's coming to invest, understands what they're investing in and where this multiple return is going to happen for them, that they see that there's upside because you're actually building something that people are going to spend on. So I'm going to kind of like explain what fundraising really looks like generally here. There's different kinds of fundraising. When you're looking to raise money to build out a product, what this usually looks like is you're, exchanging equity or tokens. You're exchanging some sort of thing of value, a future value to an investor for cash, right? You need cash today to build out the product, to build out your team, to expand the pipeline, to accelerate your building process, in exchange for the future value of either the equity of a company or the value of a token, right? So that's basically what you're doing. And you have to go out and you have to convince people with capital to give you the capital and say, like, this is actually a worthy investment. What does a worthy investment really look like? We're talking usually when you're doing a private investment as an investor, they're looking for 100x, like 1000% returns. That's what they're looking for. They're not looking for like a quick buck, not that thousand, sorry, 10,000% returns, right? All right. Yeah. That's what they're looking for. They're not looking for, oh, I can like 2, 3x on this. Oh, like, they're raising it at 5 million right now and it's equity based. And oh, like they have this, very easy track to get to like a 15 million to 20 million valuation. That's not what they're looking for. And I'll talk about the gaming industry specifically because it's very different than other product verticals and other industries overall. But specifically, what I'm saying is you really have to show that there's a really massive upwards potential. One of the ways of doing that, obviously, is, hey, look, we've built this game, but this game is built in on our building blocks, right? It's one of the things that I know. Honeycomb is a fantastic example. I know Sonic, before it was Sonic, they had all of the mirror world, components and things like that, where it's like, hey, we have these building blocks, we can build applications on top of our stack and showcase this application. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, you're not just investing in the upwards potential of this direct to consumer game, you're also investing in all of the infrastructure that we've just built. Yeah, shout out to Chief, shout out to JP and the Honeycomb folks. So that's the idea there, right? Is you could pitch an investor on that. That's a huge potential, right? Is like, oh my gosh, this is working infrastructure that is currently supporting a product, and I can see where this goes. Even if the product is just an example, right? So there's one that's very interesting, built on Magic Blocks. Magic Blocks is an L2 on Solana that's built in Unity to accelerate gaming on like any gaming business logic on chain. And there's this thing called Supersize. They just went live. They actually have our Buddy Link referral technology under the hood, but it's a fully on-chain like Agar IO type of game. Now, the interesting thing is we've been talking to them as well, and I mean, not to get into too many details here, but this is what we've been talking quite a bit about. Hey, dude, like, how are you looking at positioning this company, positioning this product, positioning your future in order to position yourself to properly raise, right? Because you need to be looking at how are investors going to be trying to assess whether or not this thing has massive upwards potential in the future. And is that this game particularly, or is that this is a game that has its logic will be built on top of, and here's 10 more different types of things that will be built on top of it? Or is it a data play, right? Is it you're getting all of this user data and you have this data pipeline that you're going to be selling this user data to other companies? I'm just spitballing here. I have no idea. But this is what I'm kind of explaining. How do you explain the value proposition to an investor where it's if you're doing a single title, how do you show them that there's going to be a unicorn opportunity with this single title where the investment makes absolute sense, that they could make easily 10 to 100x returns on this thing? That's what they're trying to do, right? Venture capital is looking to make concentrated bets on products that can 100x them. And if they make one 100x, they've paid back the entire fund. That's why they're doing it that way. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying that it's the best way of going about things, but you need to be aware that as a founder, if you're going to seek external capital, that's what they're looking at, right? This is how they're assessing you, and that's the framework that they're operating under. And you have to work with them because they're the gatekeepers of capital. So there's two big things when it comes to crypto / blockchain gaming companies generally. One of them, how do I put this here? Well, let's just actually start with the potential. Why would you want to build a crypto-based or blockchain-based game if all of the hurdles are there, like we just talked about, the regulatory stuff and all this, whatever. It's because the upside is so potential. There's just so much potential in the upside, and there's so many things that you can do once you've started to build on chain. Composability becomes your best friend. It's like it's not just you've built a Web2 game once and you can rebuild a new Web2 game because you know how to do it. No, this is like you've built an on-chain thing and you can just build off of it. It exists, and once the infrastructure is there, you can just keep building and building and building, expanding your universe. Right? That's where the idea of like metaverse happens and stuff like that. That exponential opportunity of expansion is one of the most amazing things as a founder and as a business, is that you can keep building on the stack that you've started. And one of the reasons why crypto companies have such really high valuations generally is because of this decentralized infrastructure perspective. There has so far been no ceiling on crypto. We're talking Bitcoin literally just hit 100K, right? There's no ceiling on it, and we don't know what the upwards bound is of not just games, but like anything in crypto so far. That's why you see massive multiples. That and the fact that it's globally distributed, so it can't get shut down. So there's less regulatory risk actually. When people think about it, it's like, the regulatory environment in the US and this and that and whatever. It's like, well, actually, technically, if the game is built on chain, right? If you have business logic on chain, it's so much harder for anybody to shut that shit down. And because it's globally distributed, it's accessible anywhere, right? And there's more and more throughput stuff that's being enhanced. It means that people accessing it anywhere around the world can have, obviously, albeit latency, that's obviously something you have to consider for what kind of game you're designing. But technically, people can access it anywhere around the world, not just in games, but in any of these products. That's why investors have put massive multiples on valuations of crypto companies. We're talking like, pre-product raising at 15 million. It's rare. Like you don't see that in Silicon Valley very often. Now I think with AI, that's a different story. Like they're also seeing that, but that's also because the upwards potential of AI and the narrative of AI is super big. But when you think about crypto and you think about gaming, it's like, man, I can have a decentralized game. User base is everywhere in the world. Crypto has no bounds. If there's any amount of crypto involved in the application, then you have this huge upwards potential. That's why you see multiples on crypto products and blockchain-based products. So it's something to keep in mind. That's why you can fetch a little bit more. And I know a lot of actual Vietnamese based funds. I've talked to quite a few of them. I know some who are based in Ho Chi Minh as well. You have AVV. There's a few of those that I've chatted with. And one of the most interesting things about when they're looking at, we went deep into like, why do they, what are they looking for when they're backing, Vietnamese founders and things like that? Because they're always trying to invest in the community. And I'll definitely, make myself available for some intros and stuff. Just send me your decks. I can review them after if there's anybody who is really truly chasing fundraising. Um, I can contact some Vietnamese folks as well and put you in touch with those guys. But the point is they're looking for founders who understand that whatever they're building has an impact on not just the bottom line in terms of investment, but like as in like that there's a multiple that you can make off of the revenue generation of the product, but that there is a huge upward potential as well. Think Axie, right? When it comes to gaming, that's something that I've actually heard multiple times. And the reason why Axie is such a sticking point is not because the game was fun. The game sucked. I don't care what anyone says. The game was so shit. It was so easy to game that thing. We're top of the leaderboard super quickly. If there's any gamers in the house, it was such an easy game to win. So you could top the leaderboards really easily, but it wasn't about that. If you wanted to generate as much revenue as possible for yourself, as much value as possible, it was having guilds, right? So how do you basically offset labor costs and get somebody to cheaply play your game and play for you and to generate a whole bunch of stuff? And then you saw this pop up of a whole bunch of guilds. So now you have these fractional microeconomies showing up around these products, around these games. It just doesn't, that existed before, but it didn't exist in this way. And that's what made Axie so valuable. And that's why a lot of investors talk about it, is because they're like, what is that product that is going to generate multiple different fractionalized economies around it? That's what's really valuable to them, right? And obviously you had the Axie token and you had the infrastructure underlying all of it was the Ronin stuff. So you had this now upwards potential of you have a chain that a bunch of other applications can come build on. Now I'm not saying to like go that wide, but I'm giving you kind of the TLDR, the little snippet into this is the way that these VCs are thinking. This is the way the investors are thinking is what is the upwards potential and where could this go? So you had all of these guilds who are generating economic value. You had the game itself that was generating economic value. And additionally, you had this token that's generating economic value. So there's like multiple different places where this is going to create value. And you had the infrastructure underlying the entire thing. So as much as I wasn't like a major fan of Axie at all, I think the one thing that it does really prove is look at the potential. As soon as you start building with intention, and you have like a cohesive long-term vision, there's a lot of potential, and it's an obvious investable entity. Now, Game Jam, obviously, a lot of you are probably hacking something together or getting something live very quickly, or you're just starting out. All of those times, everything that you're doing, don't think immediately about like monetization, long-term gain, all this sort of thing. But you should be thinking about what is the recurring loop that is monetizable. That is always a baseline thing that you should be thinking about. What is the thing in here that I know is going to be sticky as you start playing it? Maybe it's not evident at first, but you have to be thinking with that intention. Where is this loop going to come into play where I will be able to monetize and this will be a lucrative opportunity? That all of that will play into how you would pitch investors for fundraising generally. Um, Quick kind of like overview of what fundraising looks like today. The best way of being able to approach fundraising, and I think this is the hardest thing for most people, is like, how do I even get started? How do I meet people, etc. Well, look, you're in Superteam right now. You're involved with these guys. The Superteam Vietnam folks are phenomenal. Well, I've worked with them multiple times. Worked with on all like great, and they will basically be able to help you provide. They'll provide feedback for the way that you create your pitch deck and all these sorts of things in order to introduce you to investors. One of the big things though about how to get started is you want to kind of work with a framework and a structure in your mind about, okay, do I even need funding? And the answer is if you can create your product and get it to an MVP, we're talking minimum viable product in front of an audience without taking in anybody else's capital. Like you can bootstrap, you can do it yourself. That is the best way of being able to get there. If you can test out if the product works and if it has legs, do people want to use this thing? How is it working? Is there upwards potential here? All of that work, not only is that important to understand whether or not you have an audience and that there's product market fit for what you're building, but more so importantly, in my opinion, once you start doing that and you get to that point, you're actually showing if you then go for fundraising, you show the investor that you've de-risked the position for them. Like, hey, we went out and we've already tried all kinds of stuff before we're asking you for money. We went and tried all of the stuff out. Here's all the things we learned. And here's why we know that this is going to work. That's taking away, 25, 30% of the risk for me as an investor. I'm like, great, okay, I understand that you're trying to build from, a great first principles look. You have a crypto loyalty restriction for entities. Yeah, okay, so that's a perfect example. So I'll use this as an example in what I was just saying. So we're saying, I got somebody in the chat, Hyper, was just basically mentioning that there's royalty jurisdiction. Loyalty jurisdiction for okay, wait, actually, I don't know what the fuck that means. You want to explain what that means? Change the games except for NFT part of the Web3. Okay, wait, I'll finish this and then I'll read all the comments. I actually open up completely to comments. I'd rather have that or bring people up on stage or whatever. But my last piece that I want to mention is if you go out and you go and you test out all of these things yourself, and then you bring that to an investor and show, hey, here's the product idea. Here is everything we've done so far. Here is all of the lessons we've learned. Here's what we're going to do, and here's how we're going to monetize it. Here's what we're solving, or here's what we're pitching. That is the best way of being able to de-risk the position for the investor to make it a lot easier for them to say yes. All you want to do is stack the cards in your favor for them to say yes. Another way also to stack the cards in your favor, definitely get other people to go back channel. So like I'll always pick on Chief here. Let's say I'm talking to we'll go with Bitcraft. Bitcraft is a massive gaming investor, VC, and they invest in everything from single title games to studios to infrastructure plays. I go to Bitcraft. I'm pitching them because I know some guy. I know Ben at Bitcraft, and as I'm pitching them, I then message Chief. Chief knows Nico at Bitcraft, and I go, "Yo, Chief, can you send Nico a message, please?" And then and with detailing our round and things like that and whatever, and just kind of because I know that Chief has a personal connection with Nico, and Nico's a venture partner. So then all of a sudden it goes to Nico directly while I'm already talking to Ben, and Ben is already validating our deal. All of a sudden Nico says, "Hey, have you guys seen this deal?" That goes top down, and now you have bottom up and top down. Everybody in the firm is now talking about your deal. And additionally, at the same time of that, this is the kind of the strategy around it. You also then want to have quite a few number of funds, especially funds that, let's say we're using Bitcraft as an example, a bunch of other funds that Bitcraft usually invests with in a round, if that is the case, that they're also talking about you, especially if your target is Bitcraft. Go to those guys first, make sure they're already reviewing and talking about your deal, then go to Bitcraft, do the thing that I was just talking about with the back channeling. And if you don't know anyone, you don't know anyone, that's totally fine. That's why you're in Superteam. Superteam knows a lot of people, so let us help you. But that's a great way of getting a bunch of people to talk about you all at the same time, and will reduce the risk of people just ignoring your deal. You want to get your foot in the door and get on that first call in order to then get those conversations started. Okay, so I'm going to start reading some shit here. We have some questions. So compared to traditional games, except the NFT part, what makes the Web3 games different? Do 90% of users come to this market to make money? That's a super, super, super good question. The answer isn't easy. It's a nuanced answer. So, and I don't want to be like this political guy who's not answering the question properly, but like I'll be fully frank. Web3 games, the potential is, it totally depends on what kind of game you're building. We built Laddercaster as a fully on-chain game for a couple reasons. One was we didn't know if it was even fucking possible, really. That was like the first thing. But then the actual long-term, the reason why all of the business logic, 100% of it is on-chain. As an example, I'm going to give the most extreme example because we built the most extreme example. We did it because we're like, well, look, if it's fully on-chain, one of the craziest things about building technology on-chain is it's automated for life after this. If you put the right parameters in place and you build out actual tooling for a community to be able to vote on rule changes, and you have, let's say, what we call like seasonal economies. So like, hey, every 3 months, the economy resets or is adjusted. If you give everybody ranges of rules to vote on as a community, you're all invested. Let's say everybody in this conversation right now. We got Faye, we got David, we got everybody in this chat. Everybody is playing this game and everybody's invested, not just like financially, but like they're just motivated to play the game because they love the game. All of a sudden we get closer to the end of the season. You've played all season, you know how the game works. Hey, here's 10 rule adjustments and the ranges of rules, and you can vote on them. And if we hit quorum, if we hit the minimum number of people voting on the rule, then that rule is now adopted. It's updated in code. It is then rolled into the next season. The next season goes. If the quorum is not hit, the minimum number of people did not vote, then it just rolls back to the previous season's rules and continues moving forward. And that's kind of the interesting part of being fully on chain. That's what we thought about when it comes to building in Web3. We're like, well, the more on chain logic you have, the more cool experiments you can do with this. And nobody's done it. Like, we don't know what that looks like. So I think part of the answer that I'm trying to give is we actually don't know what the upwards potential is of games. And I think that it's 2021, it was a huge narrative and a lot of people, a lot of companies raised a lot of money on it, but we didn't see a lot of progress, right? We didn't see a lot of people doing big experiments or anything like that. We're now starting to see a lot more experiments because there's a lot more tools that enable people like yourselves to be able to build more stuff on chain. So I think the upwards potential of Web3 games, that if you build actually business logic on the blockchain, you have a potential to actually automate yourself out of a job. You have the opportunity to actually put more put more of the decision-making power onto communities and more onto other people, which is a fascinating idea. It changes the dynamic of games. So that's the part that I think is really cool. In terms of other market, like why are these users coming in? A lot of them are definitely coming in to make money, without a doubt. Like you have to know that, and you have to be well aware of that. And when I was talking about before about user acquisition in traditional games, it's lots and lots and lots. It's like 90% of your users, 65% of a user base is a value extractive user generally. They're just there to play the game. They don't spend money. And that ends up costing you an infrastructure. So technically they're often EV negative, but you have the metrics, right? There's a bunch of users. What the top, 5%, they're spending the 90% that makes you your revenue. It's so different in Web3. It's actually all of the people who have money are in crypto. They're the early adopters of crypto. So actually, the game design that you're designing for those people. So the day one, the people that are coming in, if they're crypto native, they're coming in and they're your biggest critics, right? They're like trying to make sure that this thing makes the most sense because they just bought in, they bought your NFT or they bought your token, they did whatever. They're financially invested and they're the ones with size. So you want to make sure that you're listening to them. But it means that the second that you launch your product, you're going to have a bunch of people shitting on it right away and trying to make it the best possible. So you actually have to put your best foot forward in crypto. That's what we've seen over and over and over again, not just with the products we built or helped. We've seen that with everybody's products. So they're not just there to make money. They're actually, a lot of people come into Web3 games actually wanting ownership. They want to actually have a part of they want to be part of the community. They want to have it's part of their identity, right? Like anybody who plays League and all these sorts of things, like or WoW or RuneScape, like you're always in groups and chats and all this sort of thing. I think that's it's a big thing to think about. Is like a lot of people are trying to associate with the identity, and that's a really important thing. And so they want to own your NFTs. They want to own these things because they want ownership and they want a stake in the long-term project. That's a lot of people. So anyway, now I'm going to go to the next questions. What are the biggest pitfalls you see teams falling into trying to monetize the Web3 games? Also, I know that we have 5 minutes, so I'm going to try and go quickly. Biggest pitfalls trying to monetize Web3 games. I think the biggest pitfall is actually that most people don't thoroughly think about what kind of game they're building. And because of that, they just kind of slap together monetization stuff. And it doesn't usually work. I think that's the biggest thing. And I don't think that that's just Web3. I think that's just all products overall that I've seen. A lot of people just don't think about making the game fun or the product enjoyable for the user. And they certainly often make it too complicated. And if all of those things exist, if the friction is there, the user's not going to buy. It's like an e-commerce store. If I have to accept, like click out of a newsletter, say no to terms, you know, I'm asked to add something else to my basket, all this stuff before I just click checkout. I'm lost. I'm done. I'm not going to buy the t-shirt. You know what I mean? Versus if I click your link and I go immediately and I'm on this page to buy something and it's right there and it's the first thing I do, and then after I purchase it, it goes boom, like big stars, big splash, and it goes, congrats, you bought your first thing. We're giving you, like, here's a free NFT that means nothing or something, you know, or here's this reward and you get like additional XP or whatever it is. The user is then associating purchasing with a really high reward action, and that the friction is low. So now they're addicted to that feeling, that sensation. That's how you design for that type of monetization. And where most people really fuck up is that they'll put the monetization behind a really arduous onboarding scheme for a user, which is just shitty. Like, a user doesn't want to go through a whole bunch of hoops and stuff. They just want to play the fucking game, or they want to purchase the thing without being harassed. So I think that's the biggest thing, is they overcomplicate the process for users. That's the biggest pitfall for monetization, or for any game overall. Um, what are the most effective fundraising strategies for early stage Web3 studios? I'd say exactly what I described before. Bootstrap, first thing. Try and build the game yourself. At least get something out that is testable, or show that you know that there's a specific market for the thing that you're doing. Like really show that you know what you're doing. I think depends on your background. If you're a pedigree team, so it's like founder bets and there's narrative bets. That's also a thing. Let's just start with that. Founder and narrative. Narrative is, what is the flavor of the fucking month? That shit changes all the time. Is it a freaking eigenlayer, data availability, who knows what, layer 16 bullshit, or now it's quote unquote consumer, but then they're saying meme coins. I'm like, I don't know how in anybody's mind meme coins are consumer. That doesn't make any fucking sense to me. But gaming isn't hot. Like, that's that's a perfect example of what is a narrative, right? There's no sense to it. It doesn't really make it doesn't nobody can really tell me why, right? But it's what's hot right now. It's what investors are investing in. Okay, great. So knowing when to go out and fundraise, at what time, what's the narrative that's out there, is a really big that'll help a lot. And if it's a narrative that's what I'm saying. But if it's a team bet, it doesn't matter. Teams transcend timing and all that. If you're a pedigree team, if you have experience, if you worked on AAA games before, if you worked on really big stuff before, people will see that. And if you're a really high class person, in terms of, like, you've delivered multiple times on multiple different fronts, and they see that you have a track record, that's what an investor really wants to see on the team side. We are a team. We have a decent pedigree, but it wasn't like gaming. We didn't do games before this, but it was the fact that people were like, "Oh, you guys are just figure it out," and that's what we did, right? So we're definitely more of a founder bet. And then on the narrative side, often you'll be too early if you're coming up with really novel ideas. Which fully on-chain gaming, when we were raising for it in 2021, people were like, "What the fuck is this? It doesn't make any sense." And then fast forward to like end of 2023, people were like, "How the fuck did you do this? This is crazy." So it's all depends. People sometimes are too early with their ideas. So just try and pay attention to what are people looking at. Ask investors what they're looking at right now. What are the most interesting things on their radar, and what they've deployed into. And there's a bunch of other resources I'll put in here after too. And then finally, what are their thoughts on the current state of play to earn? Um, how do I talk about this specifically? Okay, I'm going to wrap this up really quickly. Play to earn is a bit obfuscated. It's not very clear what that really means. Most people think about it as, the only reason that I'm going to play this game, this is what we'll say is the common definition. The only reason people will play a game is to earn a token or earn a prize, right? That would mean that those are value extractive users that you're targeting, and that the game does not have a sustainable loop, because it's clearly unsustainable, because you're just paying people to play your game, right? That in and of itself is not sustainable at all. Like if it's purely that you're playing just to earn, it's not sustainable by definition. If you have a whole bunch of other ecosystem products that are all kinds of different sinks for that token, then it's a completely different story. Then it might actually be something that works. You can do play to earn because there's, hey, here's 50 other things that these users are going to churn into, and they'll be able to spend on all of these different things. And that's where we're going to see the recurring loop economically, right? Like the economic loop of a token. And I'm using token because play to earn is often that you have a token that those users are earning, or NFTs that they're earning. It's the same thing. NFTs are just extremely illiquid tokens, which is even harder to make a good monetization scheme around. So I think that play to earn in the traditional sense of you get a bunch of users, it's a top-down economic idea that doesn't have any good long-term viability for driving users to other actions. It's not good. Like I don't think anybody can design, even if it's not a game. It's like even in the Telegram app stuff, like there's very few things that I'm looking at that are not just like Ponzi's or one-time pump and dump type of things. Like you go in, you airdrop farm, and you leave. Airdrop farming is play to earn. You can airdrop farm a DeFi product. That's You're playing the DeFi product if you want to say, you're using the product to earn. Airdrop farming is another way of saying play to earn. I think gaming, unfortunately, everybody keeps trying to come up with narratives, and that's why play to earn exists. But the future of it is very simple to me, which is the same way you would design any good economic system, the way you would design any good game or any good product is you need to have more people paying to play than playing to earn. That's the truth. It's the same Silicon Valley trope of growth over churn. That's it. You need to have more users coming in than users that are churning out. You need to have more users paying than who are just extracting value. That's the huge thing. And so as long as you can design any system that makes sense in that way, where there are good economic loops that you're going to have, like I said, the top 5% are the ones who spend your 90% of your revenue. If you can design a system where there's people who are incentivized to spend money because they want to, they're like they FOMO in, et cetera, whatever the mechanisms are that get those users to spend, then you can have absolutely these play to earn mechanics because they're offset by actual revenue generating practices, right? I think that's something that Axie did kind of do a little bit right, which was that they had all of these different ways that they could monetize users, albeit the fact that their entire thing was kind of, there was no way of making that AXS sustainable. Like Axie was not a sustainable game, and none of it was sustainable. But most games aren't, and so to do that and try to monetize a sustainable game, that it's really hard. So think about that. Think about how do I get people to spend in real dollars while I give out my token is a great way of building a very sustainable economy. And it's akin to the US economy, actually, ironically. How do I get people to contribute to GDP while I give out these worthless US dollars? That's the truth. How do I get people to make economic deals with me as a country with giving while I can turn on a money printer and basically debase my currency every fucking day? That is a great way of staying above float. But yeah, I mean, now they're in like crazy debt, but whatever, it is what it is. So yeah, anyway, think about that when you're trying to monetize. Think about how do you actually monetize your users without just giving out free money, free tokens, etc. But you still need to reward your users to make sure that they're going to evangelize support early days, and so that they'll talk about you and post about you and all that sort of thing. Because marketing is huge. Marketing is a great way of just offsetting any risk for you and for anyone trying to invest in you. So get the word out there as soon as you create a product. I know we're at the hour. I don't know if I see Hyper's also messaging here. A friend of mine once said, I don't care about the style of your game, but if it makes me money, I'll play it at least twice a day while sitting on the toilet. What do you think is more important, the game as a game or the economy side of the game? Listen, man, like that's a great question. It's all one thing, right? These are products. So this is why I try to stress, don't think about game as game. Think about game as the most complicated product you can build, full stop. because it is. You're talking, you have to create an engaging loop that people want to stay in for hours a day. Hours, right? The only other things that do that are like Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, etc., that and YouTube that have these. It's entertainment that keeps you there for hours a day. We're talking about I need you to actually actively do something for hours a day, or make it so seamless that you're passively doing stuff for hours a day. You have to build that loop. Then additionally, you have to think about what else is going to keep these people here, but what's going to get them to spend. I have never once spent a single dollar on Instagram or on YouTube or on TikTok or on any of that stuff, but they have all my fucking data, right? That's their monetization scheme. They want my data. Well, if you're building a game, you're often not getting a lot of really useful data because you're not pushing a bunch of content to them to see what they want and algorithmically changing how the da 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 and then being able to sell that data. There's some data you're getting from users, but you're not getting really, really valuable data. If your users are spending, you get a lot of valuable data because you know what their spending habits are. And that's a great way of being able to monetize. If there's decision making in the game that is like real world esque decision making, you know, do you want this? Do you want to support this thing or that thing? Do you want to support Sol or Polygon or whatever? You know, just pulling out random things. That gives you some really interesting insights. Pretty low level, not very advanced, but that's something to think about. When it comes to that specific idea of like, is it, you know, economy versus the game? Listen, they're all part of one product design. If your economy sucks, your game probably sucks. If your game is really good, but the economy is shot, like how many games in history are like that? They're all like that. I mean, look at Diablo 3. Diablo 3 came out with you know, auction house, and the auction house never ended up working. You didn't actually end up being able to off ramp your money in US dollars, which is what they had promised. So then the economy of the game really collapsed really quickly. Why do you think there's like secondary, you know, forum chats for Diablo and for RuneScape and for all this stuff where you can buy all? It's because the economy was so good in those games that people really wanted to be able to purchase the stuff in game, right? So there was side deals of being able to get all, like that's when you have really good economic design. Eve Online still to this day, 20 years later, amazing. So I think that's kind of something that's interesting. Yeah, I think we're kind of now getting into a bit of the question about like what kind of game you design and how you design it and sort of that sort of thing. I think you all know. I mean, exactly like you guys are all now starting to talk from experience. I had a friend who did this, and this is what they had said, and then Long just mentioned, no, I won't play a game that does this or that. See, having a heavy opinion actually is super important when you're trying to design a game, because your opinion drives a lot of the like you want to have an opinionated product because you're trying to solve for an audience. And 9 times out of 10, let's say you're a hardcore gamer. This is really important. If you're a hardcore gamer, like you have a lot of experience playing and using these products. If you have a feeling of a direction of what you want to see or how you want to play a game or want to experience a product, you are probably solving for a massive audience as well, because you're probably not the only person. So that's something to consider as well. We got another like 5 minutes for questions here, because then I gotta run. Okay, I'm taking Min's question as my last one here. In current market, could you give some monetization suggestions to avoid zero sum? Let's see. Right, Bitcoin just topped, right? Bitcoin just hit 100K. There's cash flowing into the system on the daily. Market's at 3 point something trillion. A lot of projections are somewhere between 7 and 10 trillion before this market cycle ends. Now, when is a very good question. We don't know when. And this will all come into my answer here. We don't know timing. Nobody can time markets. If anybody could time markets, they'd all be freaking billionaires. Um, I will say very simply is that to design something that is not zero sum in this market condition, if you can lean on any of the playbooks that currently exist in order to bootstrap the beginning of the product, that'd be the best way of doing that. And my example of that is, here's two. You have meme coins, obviously. is there any way of you being able to design a product that is super great and all this stuff and whatever, but then it's like you go to a meme coin group that has really good market cap and market share and all this sort of thing. We'll go with Bonk as a perfect example. You submit to the Bonk committee and you say, "Hey, I have this game. I want to make it about Bonk and all this stuff, and we're asking for you guys to just airdrop our top holders, our top players, and this and that, some Bonk, or for us to allocate some to the game so that we can distribute the Bonk, and this is the fair play mechanisms that would allow us to distribute Bonk, right? For an example, the Bonk committee can see that and say, "Hey, you know what? Yeah, it makes sense. Let's do it." Or this is true for a whiff or any of those other meme coins that have evangelized support. If there's a way of distributing the token, because distribution is something that these tokens want, that's a great way of being able to go in and latch on to an existing narrative such as meme coins. But then additionally, you're still testing out your entire product, right? You're still getting all the user feedback you want, but you're bootstrapping the initial audience with people who are already interested in something else, which is this narrative of meme coins. So that's something that I was thinking about quite a bit. And the other path that I think really works well, that is still not zero sum, is Telegram mini apps. If you have a PWA, like a progressive web app, if you built it not as a mobile, like actual like iOS or app Android game, if you actually built it mobile first and it's responsive, or it's a PWA, progressive web app, and you can put it in a Telegram mini app, that's a great way of being able to funnel users. As long as your experience is not too high friction for users, like as long as it's not too crypto native and it's pretty simple for them to get through the funnel. Actually having your game in Telegram is fantastic because it's really hot right now. And the reason I'm saying that is because you can actually just drive a lot of users through that by partnering with a bunch of other games and other products that are going on Telegram and stuff like that. So it's a great way of being able to tack onto it. Okay, final question for the students. Someone starting out in Web3 game development, what are the most important skills or knowledge areas that you should focus on to ensure future success? Let me think about this for a sec. Most important skills or knowledge. I would say actually, I think resourcefulness is one of the biggest things. And it sounds a little bit off base, but like the point being, if when Chief and I started in the Solana stuff, is because I know Chief from way back. We like 2021, there was nothing. There's nothing. Like our team started building in 2020. Like there's nothing. There's no developer tooling. There was just fuck all. There's no information. It was like there was 40 people working at Solana. It was impossible to get an answer, and they didn't even fucking know the answers. Like nobody knew anything. And our team, what we decided to do very quickly, we went to the first hacker house in 2021, and we were like, okay, all of the core Solana team is here. We just have to. I took out debt. I funded us to go to the next 4 hacker houses in a row, and by the 4th one, I finally closed our first check. So that was extreme resourcefulness on my end in terms of just maxing out my credit cards and just believing in the journey and getting us there. But then additionally, the other resourcefulness was we realized that the value was being in person with these engineers to really be able to fast track the development of the game. So already taking part in Game Jam, that is a sign of resourcefulness. Get here, get the information you need, and start executing on it. So try to, when you hit a wall or you hit an unknown, being as resourceful as possible, diving into Discord, using AI tools, finding everything possible, get as much information as you possibly can in order to try and solve a problem. Being resourceful is the most important trait that you could have today. Like try to find any way of getting around it. And dude, it sounds like, oh yeah, that's an obvious one. But man, kids these days, man, they're so fucking lazy. Like I've not experienced this. I was judging a hackathon at Waterloo. Okay, University of Waterloo in Canada is one of the best universities in the world for engineering. It is, I think, like the second best in the world for engineering. All of the top engineers end up going to Google, Microsoft, you name it. Vitalik went there. Like it's just cracked. And I can tell you firsthand from meeting those guys, like those kids were so smart. I'm telling you, the top ones versus the bottom engineers is insane. The difference is that the top engineers are relentless. They stop at nothing to find an answer. And they might be wrong. Like they might come up with a bad idea, but it doesn't matter. Like they're trying, and they relentlessly keep pushing to try and find an answer. And they'll go everywhere. They'll ask me, like, do you have any resources for this or that, whatever. And I ended up, introducing a few of them to different founders that are in Solana in order for them to get the resources. But the bottom performing ones, when we were, interviewing them on their hackathon projects or things that they had done, and this is like not a one-time experience, but I'm referencing one specific hackathon right now. They're like, I was like, okay, well, explain to me the problem, explain to me where you got to, whatever. And it's just like, oh, they ended up just getting lazy and complacent and being like, oh, I couldn't find the information, so I just like, this is as far as we got. I'm like, well, how did you try to solve that problem? And this is what I'm telling you is also the way that you would interview candidates, right? For a job position. And it's like, and the answers I was getting was just like, oh, like I went to the Discord and I asked and like no one answered. Oh, and I went to the docs, but like there's no reference for this in the docs. And oh, the crate is like outdated, so I couldn't do that. And it's like, that's just complaints. Like, and that's just there's excuses. Like there's ways around it. And if the answer is that it truly isn't possible, then why don't you try and find another solution, right? Like, why don't you try going down another path? And I think resourcefulness is like, that's where that comes in. If you can do as much as possible to try and find an answer, that will get you so far in life. It's insane. And people see that, that your friends that are like that, those are your like favorite friends who you're usually in awe of, is like, how the fuck does this guy always just find a way? Right? That is just a crucial, critical skill that I think more people need to have and need to be aware of in the age of AI, especially because it's very easy to get complacent and just go like, when in fact it is the most resourceful thing. It's the best resource out there. So anyway, that's that. Ray, you want to come back up here?
Hey, so that's the end of our workshop today, right? I just want to say thank you, Aiden, for a very insightful sharing session. And I also hope that we'll get to see you in other upcoming Superteam events too. And we have quite a lot of questions still coming in. I think you guys can just direct these questions to Superteam Vietnam, and then we'll give those questions to Aiden, and he can give you the answer when we have time. And yeah, once again, I just want to say thank you so much for all of the sharing. I think that everybody learned a lot from the session today.
Yeah, I mean, super. Thank you very much for having me, and always happy to help. So good luck with everybody with your projects, whatever you're doing, and I hope to be able to play test a bunch of them.
Awesome, awesome. So I'm going to end the workshop here, and all of the questions you guys can direct to the general chat or just like send emails to us or any way you want, and then we'll give that to Aiden. Okay. I'll see you guys later for our next workshop, our final workshop. Bye bye, everyone.